PK in the universe, or should I say Sergeant Kelly in the universe, and I am back again with another video. Today I'm actually recording this on Veterans Day. I happen to be a veteran, as a lot of you guys know, and I'm going to talk about a fellow veteran's video game, specifically an NES game that he developed. And that game is Maverick's Baghdad Extraction. I am talking about Retro Bro Gaming Entertainment's game, the Retro Bro. The Retro Bro and I have known each other for quite a while on the YouTubes. He's made YouTube videos. We've had some back and forths, and we agree on some things. Don't agree on some things, We're very different people, but that's how the world is. It's like the world would be a weird place if we all agreed on everything and anything. But I had backed his game on Kickstarter, Maverick's Baghdad Extraction. I had done an unboxing and, I lost the video of it. I don't know where it is, so that really sucks. So I'm just going to show you guys real quick what it looks like. Got to admit, elephant in the room. This is just the one major critique. This box art, what's going on with that? It looks like he has vascularity or something. I don't know. And then, of course, the manual, it seems a little stretched, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is what's inside the cartridge, to me. And this is a very nice instruction booklet. It shows the story first. And then, it shows how to control the main character, which is John Maverick. And this is actually a prequel to his other game, Desert of the Undead. And let me just say this. I have played both these games. And I think this game is a huge step above Desert of the Undead. Desert of the Undead is a very different kind of game. That's a side-scrolling game, whereas this game is a top-down game. It's also a first-person shooter game. If you guys have heard anything about this, some people have called it Zelda with guns, and that's pretty accurate. You can use a light gun. The light gun plugs into the second port of your NES system, which I know I don't have to say that because, anybody who's ever played Mario and Duck Hunt knows that. But anyways, for the first-person shooter parts of the game, that's what you do. But let's go a little over more of this stuff here. What I really like about this particular game is, the light gun aspect was a huge selling point for me to get it physically rather than just buy a ROM, buy a ROM off itch.io. I could have done that. But in fact, I got it included free, the ROM, because I backed it on Kickstarter. But it's not just Zelda with guns. It's actually Zelda with C4 and grenades and airstrikes, which is pretty cool. That's a very nice feature. These are particular power-ups and pickups in the game. The basic premise is, you're on this one last final mission to get Saddam Hussein in Iraq. This takes place during the second Iraq War, a war I served in. I served in Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation New Dawn as well, when it was changed from Freedom to New Dawn. In the later part of the wars and stuff. But so I have that shared experience with Retro Bro in serving during the War on Terror and in a theater of combat. So it shows like in this game, there's the down perspective where it's like Legend of Zelda. And then there's the, first person perspective, kind of like an Operation Wolf or something like that. And so, and it's a pretty interesting little game here. Now, it didn't include a map like the original Legend of Zelda did, but it does show there's little overworld maps in the very back of the instruction booklet, and it mentions it's a spoiler. So that's the thing. You don't have to look at the map if you want the game to be a surprise, and I think that's very important. What can I say about Maverick's Baghdad Extraction? I think it controls really well, and the light gun aspect of it, let me say this. I played this, on a handheld the first time before, and I was trying to use the D-pad. The D-pad does work for shooting the bad guys, but the light gun makes the game way easier. This is a game that was meant to be played on an original NES. It was meant to be played on a CRT TV. And that's why I'm so happy that I actually picked up the physical version. Or I should have maybe just bought a EverDrive or something. I don't know, but, I'm glad to have it, because at the end of the day, I want to support a fellow veteran. That's part of why I was so interested in this, because of the light gun aspect and supporting a fellow veteran. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this video here, is I want to talk about this from a veteran's perspective, like as somebody who served in Operation Iraqi Freedom, this game hits in a certain way. The Iraq War was controversial. There's no denying that. You can't just say, no, it was controversial. That's a fact. There's a lot of people with strong opinions about it one way or the other. I think we can all agree that Saddam Hussein was not a good person. and Iraq is better off without him. It's like, but the thing is, Iraq traded, tyranny and dictatorship for a fragile and sometimes corrupt democracy. So there's a trade-off with everything. But I think at the end of the day, is it better that the Iraqi people have the right to protest and freedom of speech? Yes. It sucks, though. There is still violence that very much exists in that region. And there's some hostility still going on. Should we have ever gone to Iraq? I mean, a lot of people say no because we went under false pretenses, which is a fact. There were no weapons of mass destruction. And that is just reality. Sorry about that. I had to get out of my place, which is becoming a construction site these days, to get somewhere a little quieter, a little back to nature. Yeah, so what can I say about this game? Obviously, Iraq War, controversial. Yeah, we know. Not a big surprise, nothing new here. I think we're very blessed, the lives we live, especially if you are one of the 5% of the people who make $31,000 a year. You make more money than 99% of everybody in the history of existence. If you make over $60,000 a year, you are the 1% of people who make more money than anybody ever has in the history of existence. We live an incredibly blessed life. And I think about other times in history where people didn't have a choice to serve. They were basically drafted. And the reason in this day and age there is no draft is because people were willing to volunteer, were willing to step up. And I think that's what makes us veterans of these particular wars very different than maybe some past wars like the Vietnam War where there was a draft. We chose to serve our country. And it's a choice that has impacted my life. It's impacted Retro Bro's life and everybody's life who's ever served. And I really am glad that I could support a fellow veteran such as the Retro Bro. But that's what I wanted to say about that as far as the perspective of a veteran. And I like this game for other reasons too. For example, I love the premise. The premise of the game is, yeah, you're on a mission, but it's not just you. Your friends are on this mission too. Your comrades are on this mission with you too, and they've gotten captured, and it's your job to rescue them. I think anybody who's served can understand this perspective. We're all working together. We're all trying to help each other. No matter what your job in the military was, I think we can all, relate to that idea of wanting to help each other and to wanting to help others too. Serving the cause of freedom. Serving the cause of freedom is what matters. And that's why a lot of us joined, is so we could serve our country. Whether you agree with the war or not, I hope a lot of you understand I understand why people don't like the wars, why they don't like war. I can understand it completely. But I also think there's an old saying, people say, don't hate the player, hate the game. Well, I can also say, maybe love the warrior and hate the war is okay too. That's okay. And yeah. What can I say about this game? It's a really well-built game. I love the going back and forth between the first person and the top-down perspective. This game is a nice game to play on Veterans Day, I think about, the cause of freedom and how it matters still. The Iraq War, the war on terror, it changed our entire culture and changed our entire country. There were good things and bad things. Obviously, 9/11 was terrible, but for a few days, the entire country was united together, which you don't see a lot of that anymore. You see so many people that are just so divided. And there were some bad things too, there was a lot of anti-Arab sentiment, racism bad, obviously. Racism bad, of course. I don't think I need to say that. But at the end of the day, it's interesting to play this game, and it makes me think a little bit about my time over in Iraq. I worked with people who were, local nationals and stuff like that. Like there was this one guy I knew who, he was a Christian, whatever, which is something he had to hide prior to that because of they didn't have freedom of religion, and now they do. So I think about people like that. People should be able to have the freedoms that they have, and we take our freedoms for granted. That's what's great about the world where we live. Things are rough. Yeah, things are not maybe great some days, but when we look at where we live, if you live in a Western democracy, you're better off than probably 99% of the world. So many of these things are, first world problems. There are people out there who couldn't possibly dream of being upset about some of the things we're upset about today. And so much of that comes back to the fact that there are people who are willing to step up and willing to serve, even in spite of everything. Even in spite of maybe the controversy, in spite of the why we're there, in spite of this, in spite of that, in spite of, the sentiment from specific people we know in our lives. So many people never even dared to think, maybe I should join the military. So I think it's important, everybody hears thank you for your service, and we hear it all the time, and maybe even sometimes it gets old for us. It's like, I just did my part. I don't think of myself, I'm not a hero. I just did my part. That's all I did. I signed up and I served. I signed up at 17 and went in at 18 years old. And it's had a profound effect on my life. It's had a profound effect on many people's lives in my life. In fact, I'm not even the first in my family to serve. I'm a 4th generation military veteran. And yeah, in a game like Maverick's Baghdad Extraction, sure, it's not the same experience as the experience I had in the military, not even close. No, very few people in the military actually were busting down doors in Iraq, okay, or Afghanistan or wherever. The majority of us were some type of, support, combat support of some sort, but it reminds me of what people had to sacrifice, and just so many great people that I met in my time in the military. Looking at a game like this makes me think, man, I'm just really grateful for the people the 1% of people who were doing that kind of work, honestly, who get a lot of the glory, and maybe rightfully so. So, I don't know where I was going with this crazy video here, but yeah, I wanted to talk about Maverick's Baghdad Extraction and a little bit about, the military and my perspective and point of view. So, thank you, Retro Bro, for making a game like this. Maybe someday I will make my own NES military style game, and I would make a very different sort of game than this, but maybe I will do that. Maybe this will be the inspiration for me. I don't know. I don't know what the future holds. I know we won't be shooting so many videos outside anymore. We're going to be getting back to the basement very soon. A lot of the construction work that's been going on in my house is almost done. So look forward to that in future videos if you're a long-time watcher of this channel. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Happy Veterans Day, and stay awesome in this universe. Later.